Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy. Man, it's been a minute.
What? You actually did that on our episode.
We're going to leave it in to show what a human I am.
Yeah,
I
I love
told everyone who tunes in and listens that I would get guests back, and I have a guest again this week, a returning guest, someone I'm very excited for. I'm joined once again by Emily Lapolice. Emily sent me a bio. So I'm going to read that real quick because Emily is great and took the time to write it. If you want to hear how Emily got into the mental health field, you can listen to episode 37 of Your Therapist Needs Therapy, where she and I chatted the first time around. Emily is a licensed independent clinical social worker, trauma center, trauma-sensitive yoga facilitator, author, and educator. She's a faculty member at the Center for Trauma and Embodiment in Boston, Massachusetts, and has been a psychotherapist for 20 years, specializing in complex and intergenerational trauma, perinatal mental health, and evidence-based embodiment practices. Emily is also the director of training at Move to Heal South Dakota, a Sioux Falls-based nonprofit that empowers youth in overcoming experiences of trauma through movement and culture-based healing arts, as well as a clinical research advisor at the Mind Body Trauma Care Lab out of the University of Minnesota Duluth, studying community-led research and trauma-sensitive yoga applications with Indigenous and First Nations communities. Emily serves as a member of the board of directors for two Indigenous-led nonprofits, Project Venture, a program of the National Indian Youth Leadership Project, supporting positive youth development through culturally responsive experiential education, and the Upajata Arts Center, nurturing creativity and artistic expression for the youth of the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. Some of that is new since you and I talked last, Emily.
Some of that is new. Well done, Jeremy. That was a mouthful. And I did not mean to interrupt you before. I assumed you might edit that out, but it's cool. It's natural.
I try and leave the ums and the pauses because, we're real people as therapists.
No, I like that. I like that about you, and I like that about what you're doing. Yeah, before we jump in, I will just acknowledge the lands that I am on, currently residing in the lands of the Massachusetts people, and specifically the Pawtucket tribe. And yeah, just acknowledging, all that has come before us, including my own ancestors of the Mi'kmaq, Huron, and Seminole tribes, and asking for their guidance to lead us in a good way during this conversation, and really happy to be here.
Yeah. So we did the intro and we did how you got into mental health the first episode, and we've chit-chatted and connected several times since you were on last. I did some of the initial training for the trauma center, trauma sensitive yoga, which was lovely, and I recommend very highly for folks to check out if they're interested in it. But just sort of, we were brainstorming together and like, how are we supposed to do what we do in, a fascist state? And how do we work with people and trauma when people are being traumatized faster than they can heal?
Yeah, faster than they can heal. Yes, I do remember that Instagram back and forth of like, what do you want to talk about? Like, how the fuck we're surviving, like how we get out of bed. What direction do you want to go in, Jeremy? And then
it's so hard, I think, to talk about other things right now, right? Like, it feels almost disingenuous, I think, to
totally
talk about DBT.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, or like meditating. Come on. Yes. But I loved how you kind of synopsized, like, okay, well, if we were to phrase that in a different way, knowing that a lot of your listeners are mental health professionals, how do we do trauma work in a society that traumatizes people faster than they can heal? Like, God, that pretty much sums it up. And so, I mean, let's just dive in there, because I appreciate what you're saying around it. Almost feels disingenuous if we just kind of go about our days, and it's always going to be a both and, because we do have to get out of bed, and we do have to interface with society. And certainly folks who are parents or in this like sandwich generation that I'm finding myself in, taking care of, parents that are getting older, but still raising my own little ones and taking care of myself and my clients and my community. It is that like, that both and. So, right. So what you were saying too about like, it almost feels disingenuous, and in a way, and there's so many things we could talk about, but the point you made around like, it's hard to just kind of go about business as usual without sort of naming and holding the enormity of what we are all experiencing. And, in a different way, when folks are stepping into practices around, doing land acknowledgements, which again is kind of second nature in up in Canada for sure. But definitely here in the States, we've kind of just gone, it's like we just like read it, right? Like we read it from a paper,
Right.
to kind of check the box and kind of do our due diligence. But what does that really mean? And so that's a whole other thing. But it is kind of just like taking a moment. It really is just it's acknowledgement. It's landing. It's just like looking at complexity. It's holding all things. Here I am in Arlington, Massachusetts, right outside Boston. Sitting in this beautiful office and all the things. But there were people here before us. And so I think the thing that definitely mental health professionals are, I can only speak for myself, but kind of navigating right now is like, how do we not name this atrocity of living in basically this fascist regime, but also continuing to move forward. And that is something I personally have learned so much from my Indigenous brothers and sisters, just around resiliency and the ability to hold the dark past and present and keep going in a positive direction. So I don't think I answered anything there, but there is some food for thought.
Well, and yeah, I think it is. I've had this conversation because I don't take insurance, and so a lot of my clientele are upper middle class. They can afford to pay for therapy out of pocket and see me regularly, and so for a lot of them, it is. It's always sort of been a theoretical experience of fascism, of knowing that Black and brown people are policed different in America, and knowing the incarceration system is bad. But I think for a lot of middle to upper class white folks, like this is their first time of being like, oh, like I could be in danger in some form or fashion.
Right.
And so I think there has been a lot of grounding. You talk about like a landing place, and that land acknowledgement really is a landing place. Like, that this is what has been happening for America's history, North America's, as we understand it, since it was colonized in 1492, like that. For a lot of people who are not in the privileged class, this has been their experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I think, the big question is like, how do we take care of ourselves? How do we kind of keep going? How do we hold all of it? Acknowledge all of it, look at all of it, because that is a choice as well, that many people, to your point, aren't necessarily choosing or don't have to look, right? Like it's a choice to open your eyes. It's a choice to kind of see the bigger picture. It's a choice to acknowledge the complexities therein. And we can flag this little nugget so I can continue this somewhat train of thought. But the ability to hold complexity is really hard. Really, really hard. There are neurological components to that. And I would say in a kind of broad sweeping macro brushstroke around what's happening in our nation right now, there is a chronic inability to hold complexity, to hold more than one experience at the same time, to hold more than one perspective. Someone putting, the quote unquote, putting ourselves in someone else's shoes that you referenced. So that is kind of, I think, a national and somewhat global endemic of its own, the inability to hold complexity, hold compassion, hold understanding. But the question is then, like, how do we take care of ourselves individually, collectively? And this is now a new buzzword. I mean, back in the day, trauma sensitive, used to be the buzzword, and it still is. It still is trauma sensitive yoga, trauma sensitive, whatever, lots of things that folks just insert there at will sometimes. But this other notion of community and collective care, and that at least for me over here in northeast New England, I don't know, last couple of years, I feel it's been getting just more attention, that we're shifting from that self-care concept to community and collective care. And I think that there's a lot that we can unpack a little bit there, and what that means, what that looks like. And for me, when we have this big question of, how do we take care of ourselves individually, collectively, globally, it kind of could be quote unquote answered, with that community and collective care. Then there's a million tentacles that we can, go in from there. But that's a big one.
Yeah. And I think looking at other cultures, speaking as someone from a Midwestern white background, German heritage, but who's been in America for a long time. I have to look for a historical perspective, because that isn't something that is part of my family, even for the family members who eventually immigrated to America. Like, it wasn't under duress. It was for opportunity or for whatever. My family's deeply religious, so it was missionary based, but it's one of those things where, looking at other cultures who have gone through and lived through these atrocities already, they had families, they had joy, they gathered and had community. And I think, like, that is, in the internet age, it's hard sometimes, because people just want to talk about how everything is bad and wrong, and we've lost some of the joy and the ability to cultivate some of the connection that gets us through these difficult times.
So one of the things you mentioned around, like, I'm a white Midwesterner. My ancestors, came here by choice, and all those pieces that you mentioned. And I think, there is this notion and nomenclature around community and collective care. And for myself, and I think I shared a little bit of this on the first episode, my own journey around retrieving and reclaiming my Indigenous heritage and identity, which is ongoing, and it will be a constant work in progress and healing. But I think sometimes a lot of folks who have gotten disconnected, as you said, by ways of just the natural ways of, like, your ancestors came for another opportunity, and for and so, like, we are where we are, but everyone has a sort of culture that they came from, and even if it's not one that you might be, or, you know, or anyone might be like kind of tapped into or connected with, like wherever we are in the world, for the most part, you know, we have these more community, sometimes tribal, way, like, um, elements at our core. Like we were more community and tribally oriented, and that's across the board. So even if I'm speaking about, yes, North American, Turtle Island, kind of indigenous ways of being and connecting, like when we just go back to kind of, even we could just say like pre-capitalism, right? Pre-colonization. No, and I can't say this like across the board because I don't have the knowledge to even say this, but I would say a lot of cultures, across the world, pre-capitalism, pre-colonization, had some centering values around respect, reciprocity, and relationship to your family, relationship to your neighbors down the street, relationship to culture, to tradition, to ritual, to food. You look at any culture, okay, indigenous or not. I mean, we're all indigenous from somewhere, in that sense. Like there was this, I mean, my grandmother was from Italy, and you know, here in Massachusetts, and when she made meatballs, the whole fucking neighborhood came, man. I mean, they lined up at her door. I think she gave meatballs out for Halloween too. It was just like they could smell it. They were like, "Oh, Millie's cooking meatballs," and they'd like drive their bikes over and come get my grandma's meatballs. I would love one of my grandma's meatballs right now. I can almost taste it in my mouth. But so I just kind of wanted to say that too, because I sometimes feel, and I'm still walking this myself, that like, and please forgive this very kind of, I don't even know what you want to call it, but like in quotes, like plain old white American, like I'm just a plain old white American. I think there can be so much disempowerment in that narrative of like, I don't know, I'm just a plain old fucking white American. Like, what do I have to offer? Or what do I have to even say about this? I don't even know the culture of my origin or anything like that. And so I definitely invite and encourage folks to, that's colonization too, you know, effects of that. And like, we all have community origins in just like soul essence, no matter what. So, I mean, I know there's a lot there, but I just kind of wanted to name that piece.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I don't know. I try and speak for white people because I'm white. Not all white people, but like, you know, I'm not trying to extrapolate beyond my experience. But I work with so much religious trauma, and these are people who are coming out of their culture. What they grew up in is unhealthy for them, you know. And if you look at the history of missionary work and you look at the history of various religious institutions, like they are colonizing institutions. And so it is work to sometimes find that community and center around something like, you know, you mentioned food as a ritual. Like sometimes it's building some of that from the ground up, and not that that community isn't out there, not that it doesn't exist, but it's work sometimes for people to find it. And I think there's wisdom in studying the history and looking to, if it isn't your own ancestry, other cultures who have lived through major cultural upheaval in living under fascist regimes. Like this is not unique. This has happened before. And there are ways to, I think, learn some of those lessons and apply them today.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, yeah, what you said about sort of that grassroots element of creating community, when community has been either denied or colonized out of us, right? However you want to look at that, or capitalized out of us, right? Because if capitalism says, hey, you don't need to commune with people or share food or break bread together, to be happy or share what you have, or you don't have to do that. You just have to buy X, Y, fucking Z, and you'll be happy and successful. Piece of cake. Amazon.com, man. It'll just give you what you need. And so that is like, it's so sad when we can kind of take that approach and try to have some compassion and empathy for ourselves being victims of colonization and capitalism, because we're all affected by colonization and capitalism. I think a lot of white folks, and I'm white, I mean, I'm white presenting, I'm only just reclaiming my indigenous roots. But we think that colonization that has nothing to do with us. And in fact, we're all impacted, and it's sad. And when we can hold some compassion, like, oh my goodness, look what was indoctrinated out of you, or colonized out of you, or capitalismized out of you. What is that's been indoctrinated or colonized, capitalized out of us? It's community, it's connection, it's reciprocity. I mean, my God, reciprocity, thinking about someone else, respect, reciprocity for the land. Do people think this is it's just given to us? We just on a silver platter, this earth, just here you go. Humans, have fun, wreak havoc, have wars, drop nuclear bombs. This isn't a video game. I mean, my God, I have a 9-year-old son, and he likes his video games and things. But this is a finite gift that we're all standing on. And that, I think, at the core of so many indigenous cultures around the world, regardless of where, there is a respect for the land. And when you can build that of just, hey, this is a gift. The sun coming out every morning, that is a gift. The waters around us, that is a gift. Like the earth, the wind, that will then transcend to how we treat each other, to how we show up. The fact that I have, a neighbors next door, that's a gift. That's a gift that I have neighbors on my street, that I'm not isolated, so it actually can be quite simple when we try to get at the marrow of like, well, what's been, again, colonized, capitalized out of us. And then we ask ourselves, okay, well, then how could I get more of that? How do I, so here's the thing that I'm missing that was taken from me. How do I get more of that? And like you said, and I also have religious trauma and shared certainly on the first episode, that piece where we all have that innate cellular instinct to be a part of a community. So what, doctrine and dogma did was it manufactured that for us. Look, here are these pews. Everybody's going to come together. Here's the hymnal. We're all going to sing the same psalms and read the same stories together and sing the same songs together. And that's just human. That is just a human need. But then when we unpeel the veil, or the whatever the thing that the priests wear, you unpeel that, and then you see the demons. Then you see the toxicity. Then you see the poison of high controlled religion, and just dogma. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, talking about capitalism, I was thinking sort of the manipulation of these in-group, out-group dynamics from this is your tribe, this is your community, to like, here's your $1 billion sports team, and that is now what provides your identity. And you're one of 40,000 people in the stadium, but there's no real connection with the person sitting next to you. And so it's, again, providing this outlet, presenting community that is kind of devoid of any of the meaning underneath community.
Oh, wow. That's powerful, man. Yeah. And even when, and I think growing up, and we all can look at my family of origin, we all kind of collectively, there's 5 of us, my parents and me and my 2 sisters, like we can hold this macro lens now to, you know, when we were practicing Catholics, and we can kind of hold the complexity. Again, there goes that nugget that I referenced in the beginning, the inability to hold complexity. But we can now kind of step back, and my parents have witnessed my journey of, you know, really kind of uh, stepping away from Catholicism. And I think at first, my mom especially kind of had some guilt, like, oh my God, did I do this to her? Like, you know, but now we kind of can come together and collectively say, like, look, there's no blame. There's no blame. Blame and shame. I mean, gosh, that's certainly the root of a lot of high controlled religion. But as a family unit, healing from high controlled religion and other aspects, like, we can show each other, like, there's no shame and blame. Everybody was just doing the best that they could with the rule book that they had, with the tools that they had. And was there a part of me that liked going to mass every Sunday? Yeah, there was. I loved to sing. I loved singing. We were in choirs. Like, there is goodness at the core. But again, we can't turn our eyes from the really harmful aspects as well. So I think when we can all be in like a continual state of learning and curiosity and compassion, that's when we can tilt the needle. And that takes a certain kind of, I don't want to say like neurological makeup, but a certain amount of access to healing and to self energy. That's, you know, from IFS perspective, but to again kind of hold the complexity and be like, okay, I don't blame anybody. You know, that the first time I touched my own body as a preteen, I felt that I had to go confess. I mean, I know that's a little blunt to say that, but it's true. Like, and nobody told me that. But that was what was, that was the messages I received. So it's like that Sunday I had to go and ask this random old, you know, white dude for forgiveness for just being curious about my own body.
Yeah. Well, and when we study the development of little kids, like, little kids are naturally altruistic. They share, they help, they are interested in that. And like, capitalism, sort of just the water we swim in, like, it replaces that compassion with competition really, really early on, and sets it against community building, and creates instead this idea of competition.
Wow, this idea of competition. Yep. And then what you were saying with the big Gillette Stadium and everybody sitting next to each other, but nobody's actually connecting. And then even the sign of peace. I remember this, you know, as I was raised Catholic, you know, nice gesture, super nice gesture. I think it was right before the blessing of the Eucharist thing. But like, everybody's just like, peace be with you, peace be with you, peace be with you, like robots, like just complete lack of affect, just like doing it because we have to, peace be with you, peace be with you. But are we really like, are we sharing our resources? Are we helping out these neighbors and these community members? Do we even know anything about their lives or their struggles? Not really. You know, that was also part of the, like, and maybe it's a New England thing, or who knows, but like, you don't talk about your problems, right? Or, I mean, it's not just a New England thing, it's a generational thing, but like, no, don't tell anybody. You know, you got to keep up with the Joneses. You got to, you know, we're going to this parish because that parish is, no, that's the other side of the tracks. We got to go to this parish, and we can't let Bob and Mary know that we're struggling. We have to, like, you know, and it just confines us so that we're in our own little silos of pain. And when we say peace be with you, what there we're, so,
Yeah.
And then we know as mental health professionals that the type of healing that we're referencing today, complex, kind of like comprehensive healing, whole body healing, intergenerational healing, cultural healing, all this kind of bigger macro sense, collective systemic healing, that can't take place in a silo. And that can't take place with one treatment modality, with just CBT or just this, or, and I think when we can approach healing from a decolonized lens of, again, holding both things at the same time, or many things at the same time. Thank you, Western medical model, for providing us, the knowledge and the resources and XYZ and advancing all the things. Thank you. And there are other ways. There are old ways that actually have nothing to do with capitalism, have nothing to do with pharma, have nothing to do with gatekeeping around healing. And I understand why you don't take insurance, Jeremy. I understand. I mean, gosh, I'm getting sick of it myself. It's so hard. But, and also, we're gatekeeping healing. That healing is only for some. And if we could get to the core of, again, like, well, what is that healing that we're trying to access, or what is the thing that's been colonized and capitalized out of us? When we can pick that apart, which I'm happy to kind of think through with you in dialogue here, then what we find out when we look at kind of the pieces, the seeds, the roots in our hands, we find out that everyone actually has access to them, regardless of insurance, regardless of capitalism, regardless of anything. We actually find, and this is the big secret that capitalism certainly doesn't want us to know, we actually find that we have all we need to heal. And that's a big statement to make, because, well, sure, but not if we're not in communities and conditions that support and nurture our healing. And it's almost like this secret. It's like this secret they don't want us to know. You have to go see a professional to get better. You have to go see someone who has extensive training and has had the means to get extensive training and certificates, and what are those things called? Diplomas. And you have to go to them, and you have to wait in line too. You're probably gonna have to wait in line, 6-month waiting list around these parts in Boston for sure. You have to wait in line to heal. They don't want us to know that we could actually start that healing process now. Right now.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was working in higher ed still, I was the director of student athlete mental wellness, and this was right before COVID hit, so that blew a lot of things up. But like, I was in a meeting, and one of the VP for the school I was at said, well, I don't understand how we're supposed to make money off of this. And I was like, off of mental health? Like, we're not supposed to. Like, it was just such a like ludicrous statement. And I could make the argument that like every dollar spent on mental health, we get it back. But like, that's so besides the point. That isn't what this is about. Like, when we're talking about wellness, when we're talking about well-being, there's not a price tag on that. I mean, apparently there is, but that doesn't make sense to me.
No, certainly doesn't.
But going back to what you said about complexity, I think complexity is uncomfortable, and sort of where we see the rise of authoritarianism, certainly in America, but like we see a turn to the right in a lot of global politics right now. As things get uncertain, people want a simple answer. And there's a desire for this person has the solution, rather than doing the work and putting in the effort to sit with the discomfort and to connect with our neighbors and to hold different perspectives to say, well, if we put all our eggs in this one basket, that should work. And like that's appealing, even if we have a ton of evidence that says it doesn't work.
Yeah. Oof. God, I love talking to you, man. Because you say these like one-liners or these little nuggets, and I'm just like, is somebody quoting him? Like, I know your media guy's gonna like pull some nuggets from what I say here, and then it's gonna be an Instagram post, and it'll be really cool. I appreciate that because I don't really do that on my end, so it'll be nice. But I'm just like, somebody getting your nuggets too, because I love speaking to you, and so many others out there with like-minded perspectives and good fucking hearts. I mean, let's just be honest. It kind of is what it comes down to. You know, I had recently come back, interestingly, in I think under a week time. Well, I was in Mexico for a few weeks, came back to Boston for like 4 days, I think, then went up to Canada. This was just at the end of February, beginning of March. So I had to do like the American walk of shame, you know, with our closest neighbors below and beneath us. But I was just surrounded by good humans everywhere I went, you know, who didn't chalk me up to just be, you know, whatever it looks like I am, or, you know, where I come from, or was just met with a lot of good hearts. But what you just said, could you remind me what you just said?
The problem with my nuggets is I have ADHD, so I don't fucking remember what I said. Clients will be like, hey, remember that thing you said 2 weeks ago was really profound and changed my life? And I was like, yeah, no idea. It just...
Oh, I got it. That's why it's a team effort. It's a team effort, man. You were talking about the complexity, right? And holding complexity is uncomfortable. It's super uncomfortable. And I'm gonna, with your permission and with the grace of your listeners, I'm gonna take what you just said, and if you're interested, put a neuroscientific spin on it, like a neurocognitive, neurological. And I'm not a neuroscience, I'm not a neurologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a biologist, but this is just kind of my take on some of the neuroscience behind the inability to hold complexity and behind the discomfort that you're referencing. And I don't know, I could be totally wrong or off. If anybody listening has more knowledge than me, or, you know, wants to do a little research study or something, let me know. But here's my take. What do you think about, is that cool?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. And then I want to hear your thoughts, because you're brilliant. Okay. So, and what I'm going to be, I'll just say too, a lot of what I am about to share is rooted in the evidence-based embodiment practice of trauma-sensitive yoga that I'm trained in and facilitate in. And Jeremy, you came to one of the training offerings. I'm actually offering one in May too. I haven't done one, I think, since yours in October that you came to.
Sure.
So I'm doing one in May. But I learned so much. I learned so much from this model, from a lot of the work that the Center for Trauma and Embodiment in Boston is doing. And it's really widened my understanding and perspective and education around the kind of neuroscientific elements of this, because I don't like know these things. So, inability to hold complexity. As you said, so much easier to stay in what's comfortable. So much easier to do as we're told. To get in the pew every Sunday, do the sign of peace, because that's what you're supposed to do. Take the bread and put it in your mouth. And, again, we're doing the religious piece, but I know that you hold a lot of reference there. And that's just only one example, but and I will say too, there is goodness in all religion. There's a difference between religion, high control religion, dogma, and spirituality. And there is goodness in all of it. And what folks who are called to religion are seeking or needing is a common human need, as we've already referenced. So I don't ever want any listener or any member of my family to feel that it's just constantly putting down people who practice religion. That's not it at all. But dogma and doctrine is harmful, really, really harmful, and it creates trauma, big time trauma. So it's much easier to be told what to do. And that's the core of fascism too, right? And what they want. That's a very high level of control. And it's easy to keep doing what we're doing. It's easy to stay in our little silos, stay behind our white picket fences, prune our shrubbery and make our little houses, our little concrete boxes, look pretty from the outside, and just do what we're supposed to do. And so when we look at the brain, basic, we have that quote unquote human brain, the cortex, the prefrontal cortex, that's where all the thinking, processing, language, executive functioning, learning, is there. And then there's the limbic system. That's the animal brain. That's just, hey, newsflash too, we're all animals. We actually are all animals with animal needs too, and animal instincts and animal desires. God forbid, animal desires, sexual desires.
Yeah.
I mean,
which is why there's so much control around those things.
Oh yeah,
authoritarian.
For sure. I had to go. I can still picture that priest that I went to. That I can still viscerally picture it when I brought myself, to confess. And I later told my mom when I was an adult, and she was like almost brought to tears. Oh my God, Emily, I would have never brought you if she wouldn't have. Anyways, so we are animals. We are animals. And we are wired for connection as well. All the things that we've talked about, community and all of that. And so, but our limbic system too, that holds our emotions and our behavioral responses and the fear response and the trauma response. That's where the amygdala is. That's where the smoke detector in our brain is. And thank God for it. It alerts us when there's danger. And certainly in experiences of trauma, repeated experiences of trauma, and living within traumatic paradigms, trauma paradigms, that's systems, that's doctrine, that's dogma, that's political fascism, that's right wing, all of it. When I lost my train of thought there for a second, but that's the alerting, right? The alerting to danger. And even if the danger is not like it's done, let's say, like it's actually not, because we're living in this kind of constant danger state. That's the piece that I think a lot of folks don't necessarily see, that it is kind of ongoing. So we're in this kind of chronic trauma response, this fight, flight, freeze, fawn, submit, right? Fascism.
Yeah. Right.
Fight, flight, fawn, freeze, all of it. That's chronic. And so our neurological, just pathways and all of it it's like it's faulty. It got a little tripped up because we're just constantly in this fear state. Now, that's uncomfortable, right? That's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It's unsustainable. It's not healthy to live in a constant fear state. It has impact on every other biological system in your body, your endocrine system, your immune system, all of it, your relationships. It certainly has an impact on your relationships, all of it. So it's uncomfortable. So what do? We don't want to feel that uncomfortable feeling. It sucks. So there's a million things we could try to do. We could self-medicate. We could try to numb. We could try to escape. We could try, or you know what? This is all too fucking hard. Somebody just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Right. Just tell me what to do. Tell me where to go. Tell me where to put my foot. Tell me what to do and I will just do it because it's just too hard. It's just too hard. And you could take a cognitive approach. You could take that prefrontal cortex. Well, the Bible said, hey, the Bible said, hey, Elon said, Trump said. I mean, I don't even, I have a visceral response even when I say that man's name out loud. But, in essence, someone in power said, do this. So I'm going to listen. Now there's this other part of the brain called the insular cortex. It's where the insula lives. The insula, as I describe it to a lot of folks who take my trainings, I go to a lot of underserved populations and here in the US and up in Canada, as I've shared, engaging with a lot of Indigenous and Native communities. And if we just sometimes we just gotta break down this neuroscientific language and just kind of explain it simply. The insula it's kind of like our feeling and sensing and noticing muscle. It's our noticing muscle. With my own kids, if they're noticing a pain in their body or discomfort or maybe anxiety too, I'll always try to say good noticing. That doesn't feel good for you, right? Okay. That's a muscle that gets underutilized and actually in conditions of chronic trauma starts to atrophy. We forget how to use that internal, very personal, very visceral feeling, sensing, and noticing muscle where we might, notice discomfort, be curious about the discomfort and not rely on those other very overutilized muscles of the threat response. Okay. I got to numb, I got to run, I got to fight, I got to, or the cognitive muscle of, well, I'm going to read this book and I'm going to get better. I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to get better. I'm going to listen to this dude and I'm going to get better. And then there's this muscle in between. That's like our self muscle. It's just what do I want to do? What am I noticing and what do I want to do about that? One of my colleagues, Leela Johnson up in Canada, that's a phrase she has kind of lended. What am I noticing and what do I want to do about that? So it's very uncomfortable. It's hard to be uncomfortable and it's really hard to hold complexity. And what engaging with the insula, if we take that neuroscience, what engaging with that muscle and nourishing and feeding that muscle, kind of nurturing that muscle, what that does is it actually helps us to be able to hold complexity. Because then we're noticing, right? And we're being curious we're widening our perspective. We might have our own kind of felt sense, but that's also going to increase. There's studies that that kind of increased interoceptive capacity also goes hand in hand with increased empathy. Because if I'm connected and aware of what I'm feeling, then I can kind of maybe more easily imagine what someone else is feeling. So interoception and empathy go hand in hand. And so if we could nurture that muscle, and there are non-capitalistic, non-pharmacological ways to do that, that is going to increase our capacity to hold complexity, to hold more than one perspective, and to say, fuck you to capitalism, and fuck you to dogma, and fuck you to fascism. That's my neurological take.
Yeah. There's the podcast, people are just listening. I'm just nodding aggressively to everything you're saying. Like, yep, correct. Yes, this is how it works. Well, and it's fascinating too, because I think, when we talk about something like connecting with community, that soothes some of that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When we talk about, like, there are ways in which some of these things that we're talking about get there, to soothing, to having compassion, to feeling connection. And there are ways in which capitalism, high control religion, authoritarian regimes have hijacked these systems. Like, these are known things. It's not a mystery. And so how do we shortcut that so people aren't getting in touch with it? So I think it's one of those things where there's not a right or wrong answer. And certainly, like, moving away from the Western colonized approach to healing, which is to say there are experts who know, there's lots of ways to get here. There's just unfortunately lots of ways that people are throwing up hurdles or creating obstacles to getting in touch with this, so that you're not in touch with yourself and you are complacent, or you are a good little worker bee instead of connecting to your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so whatever it is, we've referenced high control religion, we've referenced fascism, but it's abuse of power. It's definitely hierarchical, right? And so when we kind of look at the opposite of that, and again, I'm leaning into and referencing Indigenous ways of being, because that is a part of who I am and a part of what I have been recently embracing and nurturing in my own life and in my lives of my children. But Indigenous ways of being are circular, cyclical, non-hierarchical, so holistic, matriarchal, and at the core, there is, again, coming back to that reciprocity and respect and relationship. And so, I think maybe our last couple of minutes, we could even just sort of collectively brainstorm, like you said, there's no one way. There's lots of ways to, quote unquote, get here, like you said, to, quote unquote, be able to hold complexity, to be able to, think of other people. I mean, I think it was Jesus Christ himself who said, treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated. I mean, actually, it was pretty solid message right there, man. Like,
Jesus, woke Jesus back then.
For sure. And like, poor Jesus, he gets shit on a lot. I partake in that sometimes. There was nothing wrong with what that guy was doing. Talk about community and connection. He didn't, it's religion that then, turned that whole thing upside down. But,
Right.
and that also had financial motives, behind that. Didn't you tell me about that, man? Like, that you can't, with the whole priest not getting married so that they could something with get them. Oh no, it was my mom, I think. There was some kind of financial impetus around, why priests couldn't marry, something about what were they called? When the families would give money for their daughters to be married, the dowry or
dowry,
something like that. I'm botching it right now, but like a lot of some of those monies went into the religion, the coffers, their whatever. I don't know. Somebody could look into that. But those kind of financial motives, and control motives, right? Power motives.
Well, I think about like the missionary garden, because I know a church that has one on their property. And like, I'm like, oh, that's so gross. Like, if you know the history of how that was used to steal land from indigenous tribes and how that has led to some of our lack of nutrition in modern farming, because people who were here longer knew how to farm better and not deplete the resources. So like, it's just, even in some of these like small, almost innocuous sort of ways, you still see like, oh geez, like there's a lot of control and there's a lot of colonization, even in something so small as what is termed a missionary garden.
Wow. Yeah. So when we think like, so there's a lot of ways to get to that goodness, that marrow of reciprocity, respect, relationship. And so one thing I've been stepping into, like literally just in the, actually we started it around the inauguration. So there's a beautiful studio space in my local community in Somerville, Massachusetts. It's called Constellation. And it's a studio for creative and mindful practices. And so it's art, it's community, it's different ways to move your body, meditation, yoga, qigong, just making art together, sharing space together. She does, we kind of have like open hours sometimes where like literally it's like, come on, bring your laptop, have some tea, do this whole like living, working thing together. Like, yes, we're all remote and we're all behind our screens, but if you don't have to like be in a meeting, come and do it with other humans, right? Yeah. And so around the inauguration, we had some like, I held like open hours, like, okay, this is a really tough day. Stop by the studio if you want. I'm going to have puzzles. I'm going to have coloring pages. I happen to be a therapist, so if you want, not in a clinical sense, but like if you want to talk to me about how you're feeling, or if you want to move a little bit with me, do some yoga, some breathing, come on in, kind of thing. And so we've been building upon that. We did the same thing for the actual election day itself as well, and kind of calling it, community. What are we calling it? Kind of like community-based collective care circles, this community-based collective care. And so it's like, a couple hours, we might be doing it, once a month. And it's another way to break down barriers around accessing sort of mental health and wellness support, right? I am a clinician. But no one is coming to those care circles like for therapy. I'm not billing anybody's insurance. Nobody has to have insurance. We have a sliding scale, come and share space, where, I typically start with a little landing, like we just did, like, hey, let's just land. Let's just land in this moment. Let's just land in our bodies. I offer a prayer, an indigenous prayer, just a non-dogmatic sort of gathering us all together. We might connect, a little conversation, a little sharing, all in the presence of community, moving our bodies a little bit, maybe breathing together. And I'm really excited about it, because I feel like that, in whatever iteration, shape, form, is kind of what I was referencing about that secret that capitalism and colonization and dogma doesn't want us to know, that we have the capacity for connection, for community, for interoception, for feeling our own bodies, and doing that within the context of safe relationships. That is medicine. That nature is medicine, that the sun, that the water, that the earth, that the wind is medicine. And nobody has to wait in a 6-month waiting list to access that. And there are so many other ways. There's not one way. That's the whole thing. There's so many ways to access that, but that is sort of the, if I had to go back to our original question of like, okay, so how do we do this? How do we get out of bed? How do we do trauma work in a society that traumatizes people faster than they can heal? Well, it's got to start with us. Healing has to start. It has to start within. and then it extends without. One person at a time, one family at a time, one community at a time. And all of these things, I want to hush up so I can hear from you too, but just like, these are just all different paths, different, what's that Talking Head? Oh, we're on a Talking Head song. We're on a road to nowhere. No, but we're on a road to somewhere. When we can kind of lean into these things that we all have some access to, and even more access to if we're in a community that can support and nourish us and remind us that we have access. Because when we're isolated, we're not going to even know necessarily or have access to some of these tools or these other non-capitalism, non-pharmacological medicines within us and around us. But when we support ourselves, surround ourselves with supportive communities, safe people, then we can support each other. That's the reciprocity behind it all.
Yeah. And I think it is community based. Like, again, we're wired for it. We're mammals that, that executive functioning, that frontal lobe that humans evolved was in response to, like, we're not particularly fast or have big fangs or sharp claws. Those thinking things are designed for our survival. And so, like, applying that to how do we build community? How do we find people? How do we, if we're coming from a more privileged space, how do we lend our voice to the marginalized communities and elevate those things? Like, I think so much of my community has shifted. I was raised in high control religion, leaving that, finding community, but then, like, really building community in person has been I would say, past year. I've really focused on, like, I can't do, like, the Zooms all the time. They're great and I love it. I know a lot of people from around the world who I would have never have met without the internet.
Same.
And and I find I need to, like, be in a room with people sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's other therapists. Sometimes that's metalheads at a concert who are all just vibing, like that can be very grounding and feel like community. So I think being expansive in what that means and checking in with yourself to see where you feel safe. Sometimes going to a concert or, it's just at a pro wrestling event, how many dudes with long hair and big beards I saw, like, more than normal, like, hey, here are some of my people. So I think it's being aware of, like, community can be your neighbors. That's lovely and great. And it can be, these people who like to play board games with you or who are passionate about the climate and are protesting with you. Like, there's so many different ways to find that community. It doesn't need to look a certain way.
Yeah, I love that. These shared interests, these shared, shared, just anything that's shared, right? Because we can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. Shared. So going for a walk, hey, you want to go to the grocery store with me? You want to do it together? Let's just do it together. What's happening at Constellation? It's like, okay, so we're all behind our laptops. Okay, but can we all be behind our laptops together? And then occasionally pause and have some tea and kind of, like, nibble on some chocolate together. That's cool,
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm a big proponent of nature, just working with both religious trauma. I find that nature is very healing, but also the neurodivergent community. Nature is just so stimulating. And again, it's grounding and it connects us. And it's something that ideally everyone gets to experience. So it's one of those things that I think is really approachable for most folks and is also a great way to connect those people you see out on your walking path in the morning, those people who are out picking up garbage and are volunteering to clean up spaces. Like, yep, great, let's do that. Let's do that collectively in community.
Yeah, nature for me, for sure, is the answer. It really kind of is. And like you talked about, certainly, for neurodivergent community, but for all humans, really, we've built our concrete silos, but you said nature being stimulating and energizing and also soothing, right? And grounding, like you said, and because it's rhythmic, it's cyclical. We get to observe the patterns and the you know, I had a particularly tough fall. I had a little mental health, like, woof, ouchie. I had some ouchies in the fall. And you know, creating ritual, I went back to the same spot, you know, the Mystic Lakes. I actually really like cold plunging, so I did that all throughout the winter. And some of my neighbors were like, "What? You're jumping in the Mystic Lakes? Like, we're from Boston. That's dirty water right there." And I was like, "It's okay. It's okay. I'll take a shower after." But I went back to the same spot, right? And I took pictures too. I documented this, like just looking at the same tree, in September, and it was all covered with leaves, and then they started changing, and then they dropped, and then, you know, and to observe that sort of cyclical just cycle, rhythmic aspect of nature, that's super regulating. And that really helps with interoceptive awareness too, when we can be attuned to our intrapersonal rhythms and what we're noticing, what we're feeling, what we're sensing, what we're observing in our own bodies, and then having that be connected to interpersonal, through people, but also through nature, through this other these other types of relationships. So yeah, I love you centering, like, it doesn't even have to necessarily be relationships to people. It can be relationships
Right.
to little sand, relationships to a tree. I go back to that same tree. Man, that tree got me through some freaking hard times. I'm not gonna lie, you know.
Yeah.
And so even my own son has some neurodivergence, and like, he's not a hugger. But if he's holding Snuggie, our bunny, then he comes. It's so fascinating. He comes to me for a hug, but he has that kind, like, Snuggie's between us. So our little woodland creature, you know, just hopping around our house and offering like rhythmic, soothing medicine for my son and for our family. And then that just ripples to our community ecosystems and beyond.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And again, it's a whole separate thing. But looking at, you know, different approaches, you know, I see so many people who are late stage diagnosis, either ADHD or autism spectrum or both, and interoception is a muscle that's not very practiced. A lot of times the body and brain communication isn't great to begin with, and can be really hard. But it is, you know, nature as a metaphor. If you're not in tune with your body, but understand your body does go through seasons, and we can look at this tree and follow those seasons, and we start to reflect on our own. It's another pathway into practicing some of that and into experiencing some of that in a different way. So I just, I hold so much space for, there's these different ways. I, even as a therapist, you know, answering our big question of how do we do this? Like, in my own head, so many times I will say something, be like, but who the fuck am I? Like, what do I know? Like, that's my best guess. Like, I don't know.
Exactly.
Because it's hard. We're experiencing so much of what our clients are experiencing at the same time. And having that idea of we're all in this together changes how we approach it, instead of I can fix you or you need to be fixed.
Oh yeah, totally. I loved what you said too around, like, we all need scaffolding of some sort. So like, Snuggie helps my son, scaffold to connection, right? And yeah, some of those impaired interoceptive pathways, or not having a lot of access to them, like nature, rhythms, all these other things can be scaffolding for us. Toward awareness, toward connection. I mean, apparently going to a heavy metal concert could be scaffolding. I mean,
Well,
you might not see me there, but I fully support you.
well, and music, you know, you talked about food earlier, all these things that humans throughout all of history have ritualized. Those are some of the pathways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Emily,
Okay,
this has
well,
been lovely, of course.
I guess
I
we have
knew it
to
would
stop
be.
talking. Bummer.
If people want to learn more about the work you're doing, if people want to connect with you, where do they go? How do they find you?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm on Instagram. Just my first and last name, Emily Lapolice, the police, Lapolice. I've got my website. I'm sure you'll put all this. Yeah, IW therapies. So integrative wellness therapies, iwtherapies.com, traumasensitiveyoga.com. That's the modality that I'm trained in. And yeah, I'm offering a upcoming 20-hour training. It's the foundational training for our certification program, but literally any human can come, and literally any human can walk away with some concrete tools of really a lot of what we talked about today, and how to bring that into your clinical practice or your yoga practice. Educators come, wellness professionals, somatic practitioners, just kind of integrating some of these decolonized and trauma-informed aspects into just like being human, into like, how do you talk to your barista down the street? It doesn't have to be in the clinical realm. It certainly can be. But yeah, so I'm doing that. And yeah, I love connecting. I'm a big community connector and a global connector, and reach out, email me, talk to me on Instagram. I'm all for it.
Yeah, we'll have obviously your links to your website and your socials in the show notes, but also some of the projects that you're working with now, we'll link there so people can find more information. And like your website has just resources. Like one of your tabs is like you want to be an ally. What does that look like? And like, again, so for people who are maybe wrestling with some of these ideas for the first time or from a new direction, like great stuff. So we'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes.
Cool. Well, thanks, Jeremy. It's always a privilege and an honor, and really enjoy talking to you, and you're doing good work, and we're all doing good work. We're doing the best we can, and grateful for my ancestors too. Thank you for helping be here with us during this conversation. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Yeah, and to all of the listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back next week with another new episode. Take care, everyone.
Cool. Bye-bye.